we're doing the hard stuff with the technology and with the finished review so that what you get back is something that really is going to work for you.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast.
Minisode.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out once again with you in the podcast chair. Super excited for the guest coming up. I want to give a big shout out to Mr. Jeff Allen. Jeff Allen, of course, is the president of Cubicasa. I'm sure you've heard that name. We're going to be talking about that today. Jeff serves as the president of Cubicasa, where he leads the company's overall strategy to digitalize property data collection and unlock actionable data insights for homeowners and mortgage professionals alike. In addition, Jeff serves as the executive vice president for innovation labs at Clear Capital, the real estate valuation technology company that was acquired by Cubicasa in 2021. In this capacity, Jeff spearheads Clear Capital's in-house innovation hub, which focuses on research, testing, and development of new products and solutions. Sounds like a fun job. Jeff has held a wide range of leadership roles throughout his career, including vice president of operations at CoreLogic, chief operating officer at Rels, director of research services at 10K Researching and Marketing, as well as research manager at Minneapolis Area Association of Realtors. Jeff received his bachelor's in sociology with a master's in management from the University of Minnesota. I want to welcome to the program, Mr. Jeff Allen. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for coming, man.
Hey, thanks, Dustin. I really need to get that bio shortened. My apologies.
Well, it is quite the resume, and I don't know that when I looked it over, I thought you can't really take any of this out because it's all pretty darn important. You've done a lot of things in your life.
I guess so. Hearing it all read back to me, it sounds exhausting. Like, how did I survive that? But well, yeah,
Well, kudos for you for experiencing a lot in life, but we're here to talk about your current capacity, being with Cubicasa. First of all, am I pronouncing that correct? I've heard it pronounced so many different ways.
That's part of the fun. Call it whatever you want. Just call us when you need a floor plan. Cubicasa or Cubicasa are both acceptable. Just do whatever feels right.
Don't give me that. How do you say it? Come on.
I say Cubicasa.
You say Cubicasa. Okay, that's the way I've been saying it over the years as well. And sometimes I've switched back and forth, so you've probably heard it both ways. But we just won't feel bad if we get it wrong. Where did the name come from, Jeff? It's an unusual name.
So the company actually was founded in Finland many years ago. So I can't take any credit or involvement in the name. It's or blame, depending on your perspective. But really what it refers back to is, so casa obviously is house, and cuba is a reference to cubic, or like three-dimensional space that's captured. So essentially, if you think about it, what's happening is we're creating a 3D digital twin of the property through this scanning process. So that's what the name is a reference to.
Perfect. Well, let's dive into what it does. I know most of my listeners at this point have heard of Cubicasa, but for those who are living under a rock, let's start from just the basics, the 101, if you will. What is Cubicasa?
So Cubicasa is technology that enables anybody with a smartphone to perform a 5 to 10 minute walkthrough of a property. And from that walkthrough performed with your smartphone, so you're scanning as you're walking, you get back a detailed and accurate floor plan, a two-dimensional floor plan of the property. And one of the outputs that we do make available, which is of particular interest to appraisers, is a GLA output that's specifically designed to be used within appraisal reports. So what's really revolutionary and unique about this tech is it's the first ever technology that's really been able to produce this kind of output without any training being required and not needing any kind of special hardware. So you don't have to get a tripod or some kind of special camera. It really is just something that can be done with the phone that most folks already have in their pocket.
So let's talk about that, because I had an experience. It really, in fact, before I go there, I want to back up for just a second. You said it was founded in Finland. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the company, because honestly, for me, it's fairly new. And I think for most appraisers, they would say, it's fairly new. If you asked 100 appraisers on the street, the history of Cubicasa, I think most of them would say it's a couple months old, right? I know it's longer than that, but talk to us a little bit about the history first.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cubicasa was started in Finland, and it makes total sense. It started there for two reasons. First, floor plans in the Nordic countries especially, but throughout a lot of Europe, are totally ubiquitous in the real estate listing process.
Okay.
So to actually put your house on the market in the Nordic countries, you wouldn't dream of not getting a floor plan. And it's been that way for a really long time. So there's this whole ecosystem around floor plans in Finland already. And combine that with the second reason it makes sense it started there is this total hotbed of young computer vision talent that is cropping up in Finland and Helsinki and in other towns, and some really good, strong university programs. So combine this market need for floor plans with this technical skill that's unique to Finland, and that's why it really started there.
You know, it's
So
interesting, Jeff, sorry to interrupt, but it's so interesting that you should say that because I've always been baffled. I've always been in real estate. That's where I started right out of high school. I've always been in real estate in some capacity or another. One of the changes in my life over the last couple of years is I've started investing in Airbnbs as kind of my retirement plan, if you will. And
nice.
It blows me away how few times I can find anything about the floor plan, which is so darn important. It seems like it just should be a standard.
Thank you. I'm so happy to hear you say that. So what really seems to have flipped the switch in these other countries that started to make it ubiquitous is it reaches some level of penetration into the market. And we're not sure exactly what that level is, and it starts to become seen as standard, and people start to get disappointed when they don't see it on a listing. And so that happened in Europe first, we think, because the properties tend to be a little bit smaller there. And so the impact to value of a weird layout, for example, when you're talking about 1,000 square foot apartment, is maybe way stronger than it might be in the US where our properties are a little bit bigger, right? Or you might be more inclined to see some weird types of flows in those properties. But it also can become ubiquitous in markets with really big houses like Australia. It's already happened. Vast majority of listings, almost 100% in Australia, have a floor plan. So really trying to make that same thing happen here in the US.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. So let's talk about that. Who's using Cubicasa? What types of professionals are hooked into this technology?
What's cool about it is so easy to use, and it fits such a variety of different use cases that it's sort of this like general purpose technology. So we've got some customers in a wide variety of different segments, but the primary ones where we see the most usage are real estate photographers. So folks who are taking photos for listings and want to be able to provide floor plans as an add-on service to the agents that they serve. Second would be real estate agents themselves. In the US, about half of the listings, by our estimates, the agent takes their own photos, for example. So in those cases, the agents often are using us as a way to quickly get a floor plan for their listing. And then the growing one in the last probably 18 months is appraisers. And we have more and more individual appraisers choosing to use our technology because they are getting more comfortable with it. They've gotten more exposure to it because we've been making it more readily available to the appraisal space. So that's where we definitely see a lot of growth, but the photographers and the agents are kind of the first market verticals in the US where the product really popped.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question, Jeff. I'm going to ask you how the technology works. Of course, I don't want to get too deep into that, too technical on an audio program. But before I do, I just want to share briefly my experience. It's only been recently that I started using Cubicasa a couple of months ago. I started on my own house. I was blown away. You said the technology is easy to use. I mean, I know that's a buzz term. I know that's a marketing scheme. Folks, I'm telling you, it's true. I mean, I watched a couple of videos and honestly, I probably didn't even need to do that. Looking back on it, it made me feel more comfortable turning that thing on, but it is so self-explanatory and so easy to do. So now the question, Jeff, how does the technology work?
So it is designed, to your point, Dustin, to be all about ease of use throughout the process. But essentially, if you think of it as your phone and you are acting as a stand-in to collect scan data. So you're walking the property and you're pointing where the wall and the floor meet and just walking the property room by room. Then all of that information is processed through our computer vision models. And it turns into something in our backend system that ends up looking fairly close to a rendered floor plan. And then we make sure it's an output that's actually going to work for everybody's needs and be as accurate as possible. We do have a human in the loop at the end who kind of takes that raw output, connects all the corners, makes sure things are the way they're supposed to be, and sends it back. So that whole process is typically somewhere between when you finish the scan and when we get the results back to you is typically somewhere between 6 and 24 hours, depending on what you order. But it is really designed to be as easy as possible for the user. So we're doing the hard stuff with the technology and with the finished review so that what you get back is something that really is going to work for your use case right away.
Light detection and ranging, sometimes known as LiDAR. Do you need to have LiDAR, Jeff, in order for this to work?
You don't. So what's really cool about our technology is it works on any mobile device. There are some older mobile devices we don't work on, but Android, iPhones that have LiDAR and iPhones that don't have LiDAR, same with iPads, we support all of those devices. And so it really doesn't have to be like a fancy new, $1,200 iPhone Pro Max for our technology to work.
So does it help? I actually did. I've done, I don't know, half dozen scans on Cubicasa at this point, and they've all been accurate. There's been one situation where I did my home, and it was user error more than anything else because I was tilted down, and you can't see the roof line if you're tilted down when I looked at a closet, and so the closet was counted as GLA when it was really about 3.5 foot tall. But a very quick note to Cubicasa says, "Hey, can you pop this out?" I mean, within hours, I had the corrected sketch. But would that have been any better with LiDAR?
So it does help if you have a LiDAR device, because then on top of the scan imagery and computer vision estimates that we're doing, we can also pull in the actual raw LiDAR sensor data. And so that feeds into our models. And ultimately, can often lead to a better result, especially if you're talking about properties with cramped spaces or cluttered spaces. So if you've got a property where there's, I hate to say it, but, not in the best shape, hoarder type situation, something like that, the LiDAR devices can really help with those. So we never want to discourage people from using non-LiDAR because our process will work. No matter what type of device you use. But in some of those weird edge cases, the LiDAR data certainly does help us lead to a better result.
Well, I have to say, even without the LiDAR, the first sketch that I did, like I said, I mentioned it was on my own home. I've got a storage room, a food storage room that in some cases is floor to ceiling, bags and 5-gallon buckets and you name it, right? And I honestly thought, I was waiting for it to fail. I really was. I was waiting for this thing to come back and I'd be like, yeah, see, I knew it. I knew they could. And I'm telling you, even through those buckets that I couldn't even see as a human being, it came up with the right state. It was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, what you're experiencing is accumulated learnings over years of this product being out in the market and being used as many times as it has, right? We continually learn every day. Our model gets better every day. And because we've done with our technology, since we've started more than 1 million floor plans over 170 different countries, we've learned how to really scale this out and support even really hard, difficult property types.
You keep using this term floor plan. And I think if you talk to most appraisers, they will typically use the word sketch. Tell me the difference in your mind, Jeff, between a floor plan and a sketch.
So great question. So a sketch would be what most appraisers are used to for a typical traditional appraisal assignment. You're talking about exterior walls and random floating room labels. That sounds disparaging. I don't mean it to be, but that's what a sketch is. A sketch is really, I always think of a sketch as being something that helps the appraiser with their own internal determination of the value. But when you're talking about like, how does a lender use a sketch? Having spent a lot of time with lenders, I can tell you they don't really use it because they find it unuseful. They're not able to get much of a sense for the property's flow or functional utility at all. So with a floor plan, you're going an additional factor of detail in, and you're including things like interior walls, doorway openings. A lot more detail can be provided in our floor plans around like the specific location of fixed furniture and appliances in the kitchen. So I would think of a floor plan as kind of going that additional level. Fannie Mae, as probably your listeners know, and Freddie Mac for the new desktop appraisal and for the hybrid appraisals that are being piloted in test and learns require that level of floor plan interior wall detail. And the reason that they do that is because a sketch alone really does not give the end user of the report or an appraiser who's doing the desktop or hybrid any kind of sense of functional utility, right? Do we have a bedroom that's super small? Do we have a bedroom that you can only get to via a bathroom, for example? You can't tell any of that unless you have the level of detail that a floor plan provides as opposed to a sketch. So while appraisers don't need, for traditional assignments today, they don't need to get a floor plan, they can just do a sketch. We think of it as like leveling up and giving the underwriter and the lender, a lot more information to help them really understand the flow of the property.
You've sponsored some of my my podcasts, and so I need to throw that out there because I want my listeners to know that I'm also going to ask the hard questions. I wouldn't be fair if it didn't. And so, are you ready for some tough questions, Jeff?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first question is going to come from appraisers who are skeptical, right? They are used to their 100-foot tape. They're used to their roller. They're used to their laser. They're used to doing things, quote unquote, by themselves and not, quote unquote, trusting an app. What would you say to the skeptical appraiser?
Well, a couple of things. First, I would say appraisers should always use whatever data source they feel most comfortable with. No technology is ever going to eliminate your obligation or your freedom under USPAP to report on what you think is most credible. So, if you use Cubicasa and determine, I love the use of this, but I feel a little bit differently about how the square footage came out, that's your obligation as an appraiser within USPAP to use the data source that you feel is most credible. So we never want appraisers to feel like they got to feel pressured to use our product, but first thing I would say is validating your measurements. Is that the highest and best use of your time, especially for more complex properties? Does the 45 minutes you might spend on a complex property measuring each individual exterior wall and perhaps with really odd angles and measuring all that down to the inch, is that the best use of your time on that property? When our technology has been tested and proved to be able to provide super accurate information on those properties, that could save you a lot of time, especially when it comes to providing things like interior walls. Second, our industry already has been grappling with the issue of GLA data consistency for quite some time. And I would say that more and more conversation is happening in the industry about, okay, if appraisers hand measuring is the gold standard we've had so far, then why do we see so much inconsistency in that gold standard?
Bingo.
So, for example, we did some of our own analysis on this, where if you send two different appraisers to the same property to measure it, typically they end up about 5% apart on the GLA.
Oh,
That's
wow.
the average.
Okay.
And it's not always error. Sometimes it is an inconsistent application of principles.
Sure.
One appraiser will choose to treat square footage pertaining to stairwells, for example, the same way they were taught 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the other appraiser in the same market will do it a slightly different way because that's what they were taught.
Right.
And I think that's why you're seeing Fannie Mae try to align everybody to ANSI, is because the GSEs absolutely recognize there's a data consistency problem in the traditional appraisal process. So I would say from our standpoint, our models are all attuned to be consistent. So when it's measured, no matter who's doing the scan, we will produce it to the same principles, right? And we align that to ANSI so that we can make it aligned to where the industry's trying to go.
Very good. I'm going to pin you down on that term for just a second, because I've heard, I follow the blogosphere. I run in the circles of appraisers. I get what they're talking about. I understand their frustrations. I think it's on your website that Cubicasa, quote unquote, aligns with ANSI. And I know that, some appraisers might scoff at that. Well, there you go. It just aligns with ANSI. It doesn't comply with ANSI. So why would I use such a thing? I have my own opinion on this, Jeff, but I'll let you go first. What are your thoughts about somebody who might say, well, align with ANSI? What does that even mean?
Yeah. So it's more of a technical matter than it is a practical matter. So what I mean by that is we have built our entire GLA calculation model to perfectly align to ANSI as it pertains to all of the key elements of how interior space square footage should be calculated. The only reason we can't say we quote unquote comply with ANSI is because technically the way ANSI is worded is that it says you measure from the outside.
Gotcha.
And our technology doesn't measure from the outside. Our technology calculates square footage from the inside scan, and then we add in external wall thickness.
Gotcha.
So we never wanted to try to misrepresent our product because of this very specific definition of ANSI.
Right.
But if you're talking practically, like if you scan a property, is the output going to be what an appraiser would choose to do in terms of how it defines below grade and whether that's included or not, for example? We're totally matched up to ANSI in that standpoint. How would you answer that?
Well, exactly. I would go along the same lines. I would say, just as you can't say that an appraisal report is USPAP compliant, because no appraisal report is USPAP compliant. Appraisers are either compliant or they're not compliant, right? I would say the same thing about something like this. And my experience has been, if Dustin Harris goes out to measure a 7,000 square foot home that has angles and ups and downs and you name it, and I try to get that, aligned with ANSI as quickly as I can, I'm going to be at the property probably 2 hours. And it's probably not going to align very well with ANSI because of human error, where a technology like this, my experience has been so far very positive in that it was, and I'm even going to go out on a limb here, Jeff, and say it was better than my human error could be.
Wow. That's so cool. I just out of curiosity, what parts of it of human error did it seem to address?
Yeah. So, for example, when I sketch, I'm going to use that term. When I sketch a home, I always do it from the exteriors, at least as much as possible, right? And I mean, I'm just going to freely admit here, right? There are times, and I think that most of my listeners will agree with this, at least, maybe not outwardly. I'm going to throw myself on the altar a little bit here. You can get around to the other side and be 3 or 4 inches off, right? In other words, the west side doesn't meet the east side. Do I go back around and try to figure out where that 3 or 4 inches is? Probably not. If it was 3 or 4 feet, absolutely, right? Sure. But when I use something like Cubicasa, it's right. It just is right. It's accurate. Right. So my point is, and that's just one example, right? My point is humans make mistakes. I'm not saying technology doesn't, but there's far less flexibility there to make mistakes. At least my experience has been, I look at those floor plans that are put out by Cubicasa and I'm like, I couldn't do that. I mean, at that angle, there's no way I would have got that exact as the technology did.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, and I think to your point about kind of the unique angles and kind of more complex properties, that's where we see a lot of use in the traditional appraisal space. Is and we recognize our product doesn't make sense for an appraiser who's going out to measure a 1,200 square foot rectangle. You can probably do that in your sleep, right? But when you start to get above that level, the complexity that goes into the measuring and the drawing and getting all those calculations to line up is definitely more of a workload.
Yeah. Well, and for me, it comes down to, I'm always preaching hard on the ROI, right? The return on investment. People look at new technology and go, oh, it's so expensive. And I'm thinking, is it expensive or is your time expensive, right? I mean, if I can video a home and by the way, I did this over the weekend. I think maybe it wasn't the weekend, but anyway, Thursday, I think I did a Cubicasa on a property. It took me about I want to say 8 minutes, start to finish. It was 2 stories. It had an outbuilding that was also included, by the way. That's a cool thing. And a detached garage that was also included in there. And I'm thinking, that would have taken me probably at least twice that much time, right, to do by myself. And I'm guessing it probably wouldn't be as accurate. So when you look at cost and you look at your dollars per hour, folks, what are we talking about here?
Right. Yep. Exactly right. Well, I love that you keep testing it. Please keep using it and giving us all sorts of ideas for how to improve it.
I love that. Thank you. And I love a company who's open to change and hey, have you looked at this? And what about this feature? And how does this work? I love all of that. So as we close up here, Jeff, let's talk a little bit about cost, because you have a free floor plan option right now. I want to hear about that. Free is good, right? FREE. We like free. Talk to us.
For sure. So we just launched the free floor plan option, but it really is aimed at the real estate use case, because the use case for that space is really just about property marketing, right? So what they're looking for is a basic black and white floor plan image that helps them get across to buyers the flow of the property. Will my furniture fit in this bedroom if I buy this house? That level of detail.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a new offering that we are able to support the real estate case with, because we made investments in the computer vision and further improving our kind of efficiency and our cost to produce the floor plans. So we're excited about that. And really, it's designed to try and accomplish in the US what is already happening in the European markets, right? Just floor plans make the process of buying a house better. And so how do we get from the niche use of floor plans in the US towards them being ubiquitous in the listing process?
Right.
What we've also been able to do with this new launch is lower our pricing overall for all of our other add-ons.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I love that.
So it's now really affordable if you're an appraiser and you want to use this. You can use the product now for as low as $15. That'll get you the output of the digital GLA that we're talking about here that shows alignment to ANSI and has calculations of living area and non-living area. That gets you a PDF that you can upload easily into any of the appraisal software packages and meets, again, the Fannie ANSI requirements from the calculation standpoint. So that's very exciting. We're really going after adoption as much as possible. We want as many people to use the product as we can because we know that the more and more people start using this, the more that digital floor plans will start to become something that the market is more comfortable with. And we know the real estate market's super comfortable with it, and appraisers are just starting to get comfortable with it. And so the more we can lower the barriers to using the product, the more we can get everybody moving and move towards this kind of digitization of property's future that we think is coming.
I love it. It's so exciting. It's so cool to see this technology rolling out and getting bigger and more adoption. Jeff, tell us more about how one of my listeners might be able to learn more about Cubicasa. I know you have an unusual website. We're used to putting .com at the end of everything, but not on yours. Give it to us.
Yep. So go to Cubicasa and you'll find us. So CUBI.CASA. And there we've got all sorts of information there about how to sign up. It is as easy as just getting started. If you want to, for appraisers, obviously you're going to want the GLA report, which does cost that $15 I mentioned. But we always have the first usage of the product be free no matter what. So if you want to try it out and get the GLA output, you can do that at no cost for your first scan.
And folks, trust me, you will try it and you will go, I cannot believe how easy that was. Mr. Jeff Allen, thank you from Cubicasa. Appreciate you joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Dustin.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.